This video is an ultimate controller guide for Destiny 2, and today I'll be covering everything you need to know in order to achieve peak performance as a console player. I'll be going over some of my most requested topics, including how to aim and optimize your movement on controller, the best controller settings, gameplay tips, and more. So hopefully this video answers your questions and helps you improve your in-game performance. I know there are some veteran console players out there who are looking for advanced techniques, and there are also plenty of you guys who are newer to Destiny and might be overwhelmed by stuff like the settings, button layouts, and the nuances of movement and gunplay. But regardless of how experienced you are, this video should help you take your controller game to the next level because there is always something new to learn. This video covers the basics and some more advanced gameplay strategies that are all specifically designed to be applicable to controller players. I feel like there are plenty of controller-specific topics out there that don't get much attention because so many content creators these days are on mouse and keyboard. It took ages to make this video and make it as relevant and helpful as possible, so I'd really appreciate you leaving a like rating down below if you find any part of the video enjoyable or informational. All of the sections of this video are interdependent because, for example, you cannot master aiming if you don't have the right settings on your controller first. So with that in mind, I'd highly recommend watching all of the sections, but there are marked timestamps so that you can navigate the video. Let's get into it. Movement is an integral part of Destiny 2, and while this isn't a video dedicated to movement, it's still important to recognize certain movement topics as they apply to controller players. Jumping right in, strafe is key to winning engagements and causing your opponents to have a more difficult time tracking you and hitting their shots. Mouse and keyboard players generally have a lot more flexibility when it comes to crazy movement, and this allows them to be more unpredictable and overall more effective with their strafing. So as controller players, we must try to figure out ways to still be evasive in gunfights even with our comparatively limited movement. A somewhat basic and yet impactful mistake that newer Destiny players make is having really poor strafing patterns. They can often be seen firing while stationary, walking forward, strafing in one direction for a long time, or strafing back and forth in an extremely predictable pattern. It's important to improve beyond this type of strafing because even average aimers will land almost all their shots against someone with poor strafe technique. Seriously, like the outcome of basically every engagement comes down to aim and movement, so if you can make it hard for your opponent to hit you, that's massive. So with all of this said, there are two key things to having good strafe as a controller player. Number one is to strafe at different angles, but stay roughly perpendicular to your opponent. As you can see from the opponent's perspective, this makes your strafe appear way faster than if you're just moving towards your opponent or at like a 45-degree angle. Number two is to change directions unpredictably and utilize the fact that, unlike mouse and keyboard players, controller players can strafe in literally any direction. Going back and forth the same amount in the same direction is very obvious, so try to switch it up and keep your opponent guessing. With that said, please be aware that moving your left thumbstick like crazy will not make you have good strafe. Look at this example. This is what it looks like from a third-person perspective if I just go crazy with my stick movement. Because strafing has acceleration in Destiny, you can see that my character is basically just holding still despite the crazy movement that I'm doing on the thumbstick. So instead, just make sure that you're moving your thumbstick more deliberately so that your character starts to actually strafe before you change directions. You can also really use your strafe to help you with your right stick aiming in order to really enhance your precision. And that will be something I'll be covering later in the video, so be sure to stick around for that. Oh, and pro tip, if your opponent is just beaming you with headshots, throw in a crouch in the middle of the fight. The sudden change in the position of your head can easily make them miss a lot of shots and lead to you winning the engagement. Although the single crouch is often beneficial, another thing you can do is spam the crouch button while strafing to make your character model move like crazy. Like, look how it's basically impossible for me to snipe this random guy I matched in quick play the other day while he's doing this. The next thing I want to mention is about looking around. Since controller players turn slower than mouse and keyboard players, I know turning around can be a bit awkward, but it's essential for us controller players to still look around frequently while we're not firing. This is beneficial for a few reasons. When you're trying to read the radar, there are these big slices of red, or whatever color it is if you're using colorblind settings to be extra cool. Anyway, my point is that the big slices of red are large enough so that you can't actually know where your opponent is within the slice. But if you pan your camera back and forth while looking at the radar, you can pay attention to when the red switches from one slice of the radar to the next, so you can pinpoint your opponent's exact location. The other benefit is you'll have a much more complete idea of your surroundings. I often see less experienced players only look where they're going and at their target, and that really decreases their overall awareness. Next up, I want to mention sliding. Sliding is an essential part of any player's movement toolkit. If you're not sliding around frequently while in PvP, you're just doing it wrong. Sliding makes you a lot more evasive, and as I'm sure you've seen in every PvP game ever, it's great for closing the gap while using a shotgun. Now, you shouldn't be predictable and only slide into engagements, but sliding is a great way to enhance your movement and contrast your jump. Movement in Destiny is really insane compared to most other FPS games, and if you're not taking advantage of your jumps, you're really not playing to your highest potential. Jumps are extremely powerful, especially when you're playing against other controller players on console, because the default sensitivity on Destiny is 3, and many players just choose to play on a lower sensitivity. If you approach your opponent while in the air, first of all, there's a good chance they won't even see you and you'll get a free kill, but even if they do see you, it will take them a long time to aim all the way up to your position in the air. And by the time they finally do aim to your location, you'll be rapidly traveling back down and they'll have a difficult time tracking you. This basically ensures that you win the gunfight, unless you just miss all your shots or your opponent predicts your jump. Jumping and hitting all your shots at the same time can be pretty difficult while using a default controller and default settings, so I'll be showing you some of the ways to solve that problem in the next section of the video. There's also a pro hunter tip that I want to mention about the dodge ability. As a low sensitivity controller player who plays on PC, I'm constantly outclassed when it comes to movement in PvP. Any mouse player can turn 180 degrees instantaneously, and that's impossible for us controller players to do even when we're running max sensitivity. It's one of the main disadvantages to playing controller, especially when facing off against mouse and keyboard players. So if you're on Hunter, you can mitigate this by using the dodge to instantly change direction just like a mouse and keyboard player. If you dodge in your desired direction like this, and then swing your camera around using the right stick while in the dodge animation, you will have effectively performed an instant 180. A movement that is usually exclusive to mouse players. I use this a ton, and it's one of the ways that I'm able to afford playing on a lower sensitivity and still have half-decent movement. The last thing I want to mention in the movement section is to keep your opponents in front of you whenever possible. As controller players, we can't turn very fast to react to threats that are behind us, and this is particularly true for those of us on lower sensitivities. If you dive into a group of enemies, your chances of survival instantly become much lower. So with that in mind, if you can keep your targets in front of you, you'll be able to have much better crosshair placement and you'll be setting yourself up for success. This is probably somewhat intuitive when using long-range weapons like snipers, but this actually applies to shotgunning as well. The best shotgun players on console are able to control their engagements to ensure that they're never too far behind enemy lines and surrounded. Being surrounded is a worst-case scenario for any console player. Before we get into talking about your setup, controller selection, and controller enhancements, I want to quickly mention that I have a community Discord server with thousands of awesome, non-toxic Destiny players. Whether you're looking to LFG, ask questions, or just hang out with myself and other like-minded players, we'd love to see you join. The Discord link is in the video description. Next up, I'll be covering your physical setup, including controller selection and add-ons, so that you've got the right tools for the job. And as a disclaimer, I'm not sponsored by any of the companies mentioned at the time of making this video, so these are just my genuine opinions on these products based on my experience using them over several years. I've used default controllers, SCUF controllers, and now the Astro controller, and I can tell you that the custom controllers definitely provide a certain mechanical advantage that can really help you out. Let me explain. Most custom controllers come with buttons or paddles on the underside of the controller, and you can make those buttons replace a couple of the normal controller buttons. For example, I use the buttons underneath to activate my jump and my crouch. This is really important because it allows me to move and aim with both sticks at the exact same time that I'm jumping or crouching. Being able to perfectly angle a jump or movement ability will really help you do everything that we just discussed in the movement section. With a normal controller, you'd have to take your thumbs off the sticks in order to hit the jump button, but the paddles let you control that with your middle finger so you can keep your thumbs on the sticks at all times. Keeping your thumbs in the exact same place on the stick will help you become more consistent, build muscle memory, and make it much easier to shoot while jumping, sliding, and crouching. Have you ever seen someone with insane movement just flying through the air and still hitting all their headshots? Well, there is a high likelihood that they were either on a custom controller or using one of the special button layouts or grips that I'll be covering later in this video, so be sure to stick around for that. I've been using custom controllers for years now, and I don't think I'll ever go back to a controller without back buttons or paddles. I just find them to be that valuable. There are some links to a few custom controllers along with a lot of other helpful things down in the description, so go check them out. A popular addition that people make to their controllers are control freaks. These are small thumbstick extenders and grips that improve the range of motion and control over your sticks. I've used these in the past and found them to be a pretty helpful and inexpensive way to be more precise on higher sensitivities. If you think about it simply from a physics standpoint, having a longer stick allows you to make larger movements with your thumbs and essentially increases the total length of the arc where your thumb moves. With the default thumbsticks, some players feel that it's difficult to be precise if they need to make a tiny adjustment in-game. Being able to make that tiny adjustment by moving your thumb just a fraction of a centimeter can be pretty tough. There's also a link to some control freaks in the video description, and you may find them especially helpful if you're trying to become a better sniper. Before we move into the next section, I want to mention a really important aspect of any player's physical setup: consistency. If you want to consistently perform in FPS games and depend on your muscle memory, it's important to keep as many things the same as possible. Try to keep a consistent distance between yourself and the monitor, and try to always grip your controller in a way that is comfortable and allows you to always place the same part of your thumb on the sticks. Try to sit and position your legs in the same place so that you have as few physical discrepancies as possible between different gaming sessions. Aim. Mechanical aiming skill is clearly an essential aspect of any FPS player's toolkit. You may hear that positioning and movement are the true skill gap, and in some cases that's accurate, but none of that stuff matters if you can't actually land your shots when it comes down to it. This section is going to be about maximizing your potential in the aiming category, because I really believe that with a bit of knowledge and understanding of the game systems, any player can significantly improve their game and build good habits through consistent practice. There are several aiming techniques and mechanics that are unique to controller players, and understanding them can go a long way towards increasing your precision, consistency, and confidence while aiming. Let's start off with a concept that I'm calling left stick and right stick dominance. At the most basic level, us controller players have the left stick that controls movement and the right stick that controls where we're looking, or the camera. Depending on the situation, it may be best to aim with just the left, just the right, or both thumbsticks. So let me explain. I know I previously talked about strafing with the left stick as a way to be evasive, and it is, but it's also a great way to help out your aim in mid to long range gunfights. Precision movement is one category where controller has an edge over mouse and keyboard. Keyboard players can only move in 8 directions by using the W, A, S, and D keys. For example, if a keyboard player wants to move to the left, they only have 3 directions that they can move. On the other hand, if you're using a controller, you can angle the thumbstick to move at any angle to the left. This can be used to aim extremely accurately by moving your character. In this example, I'm at super long range, I'm using a high sensitivity on my controller, and my reticle is on head level, but it's a bit too far to the left. I could try to correct for this by using my right stick, but that would probably cause me to overcorrect and I'd miss. So instead, it may be best in this situation to simply strafe using my left stick in order to line up the shot. I could strafe directly to the right to move my crosshair rapidly, or I could strafe mostly forward and just a bit to the right in order to effectively aim slower and perhaps more accurately. In this next example, I'm at mid-range using a hand cannon, and I clearly need to make a large adjustment to hit a headshot. In this type of situation, it's usually best to use both thumbsticks together to strafe and make a large aim correction at the same time. In this final example, I'm at close range with a shotgun. It's definitely best to use your right thumbstick to make big, fast adjustments here, because precision isn't important. Your left stick will be used to make the necessary movement to get in shotgun range and outplay your opponents, but it won't really be used to aim like it was in the previous 2 examples. Next up, I have to mention the most important part of any console player's aim: crosshair placement, aka centering. When you aim down sights, you want your crosshair to be right on target, so all you have to do is fire. In the background gameplay, try to pay attention to how I usually try to aim down sights very near or already on top of my opponent. This allows me to spend very little or no time at all moving my reticle to their head and firing. On the other hand, if I aim down sights very far away from my opponent, I'll have to do a very large correction, which may lead to me missing, and will definitely lead to my opponent getting the first shot because I'm taking ages to correct my bad crosshair placement. Whenever I watch a newer player's gameplay, they're either looking too high up, too far down, or they're just being lazy with their aim while moving around the map and they aren't putting their crosshair in potential enemy locations. As you're traveling around the map, be sure to always put your crosshair where you think an enemy might be, regardless of if you actually know their location. Whenever I post my gameplay on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, I invariably get comments from salty people saying that I'm playing against, quote, bot lobbies, unquote, and only against new players. In reality, everyone in Destiny 2 plays the same connection-based 6v6 lobbies, with the exception of the separation that occurs between console and PC. Reticle placement is one of those things that experienced players can do that makes the game look kind of easy. And it makes sense, right? If you're always looking at your target before you aim down sights, you'll always be aware of their position, and aiming becomes a lot simpler. If you want to get a true sense of what good crosshair placement looks like in actual games and not just highlights, I recommend watching good players live on Twitch streams. I do have a Twitch that I stream on every week, and I'd love to see you there and answer all your questions. The link is twitch.tv/ShadowDestiny. So after hearing that last section, you might be wondering what practical things you can actually do to optimize your crosshair placement. The main thing to be aware of when running around the map is the caret that appears in the middle of your screen while you're sprinting. This indicates the exact location that your crosshair will be when you ADS, so you should always be trying to have it at the exact head level of a Guardian. Look towards common player positions, use your radar, train your eyes to detect movement, and try to predict exactly where someone will be before you aim down sights so that you'll only need to make minimal adjustments to acquire your target. When you're not sprinting, you can accomplish this by aiming with the hipfire crosshair before you ADS. Snipers don't have a hipfire crosshair, so I'd recommend practicing the following with every sniper that you regularly use. Pick a small target, anything. It could be a dreg in patrol, a certain part of a tree, or even a friend in a private match. Go to an appropriate range and then adjust your centering as much as you want until you think your crosshair will be right on them. Then, aim down sights and see how good you actually are. This will really help you get a visual idea of where the center of your screen actually is relative to your gun, so that you can improve your crosshair placement. Check out this example that demonstrates what good and bad crosshair placement can do to your game. At the beginning, I'm aiming at head level to the right of this box, but nobody peeks. Instead, this guy decides to, quite expertly, jump shot me with his Jotun. Observe how I aim down sights almost directly on his head, and how that lets me fire rapidly and get the kill before he falls back into cover. As I dodge out of the way of his Jotun projectile, the radar tells me that someone is nearby, so I come around the corner with my camera centered and looking at head level. This allows me to quickscope this shotgun rusher before he's able to react. Now here's where my crosshair placement game kind of falls apart. I didn't expect this warlock to be up in the air, so when I aimed down sights I was pretty far off. In comparison to the previous two shots, you can see that my poor crosshair placement forces me to take much more time aiming to his head, and he probably would have killed me or at least flinched me, but he was out of ammo and needed to reload. My crosshair placement was average on the last guy, but I was still able to abuse Destiny's flinch system to secure a headshot. Now before we move into talking about the best controller settings, I want to talk about aiming styles. This is mostly applicable to snipers, but I guess it could make sense for the first shot that you take on some primary weapons. When you're moving your crosshair to the target, there are a few main ways that people do it. Some people will deliberately line up their shot and confirm that it's on target before firing. Other people will drag their crosshair in one sweeping motion across the target and fire when they believe the crosshair is on the head. Lastly, some people will wildly flick their stick as fast as possible towards the target and hopefully fire before their opponent. Out of these three aiming styles, I highly recommend the drag shot above the other two for most situations. Dragging your crosshair over the target and firing is a good middle ground between meticulously lining up your shot and wildly flicking the thumbstick. I find that this method also takes the most advantage of the aim assist reticle friction mechanic and allows you to hit more of your shots. For anyone who may be unaware, reticle friction is a type of aim assist that is unique to controllers and causes your reticle to move slower when you're over a target, so that is why dragging your reticle over the target is so effective. Also, it's essential to be moving at least one of your thumbsticks when you take your shot, because if neither are moving, it won't activate this type of aim assist and it'll be super hard to hit your shot. If you're enjoying this video and want to improve your overall gameplay, consider subscribing, because as a controller player myself, all of my videos provide a perspective that is especially helpful for all you controller players out there. Not all of my videos are specifically about controllers like this one is, but I will always mention tips and strategies that are applicable to controller players. Next up, we have settings. This is really an important section because if you have suboptimal settings, that can make it really hard to do all of the other things mentioned in this video. Let's start off with a pretty hot one, sensitivity. Right off the bat, let me just tell you there is no best sensitivity. If anyone has ever told you to use a certain sensitivity because it is the best, they probably weren't giving you good advice, because each Destiny player is different when it comes to things like reaction times, playstyle, personal preference, hand-eye coordination, and other factors that can have an influence on what sensitivity is best for you as an individual. So with all that said, how do you discover which sensitivity is best for you? I think there are quite a few things to consider when asking yourself that question. Two things immediately come to mind. Which general playstyle do you have, and do you desire more consistency and accuracy, or enhanced mobility and reaction speed? Lower sensitivities are generally more conducive to increasing accuracy and consistency, while higher sensitivities allow you to turn faster and ultimately react faster while aiming. Check out the graphic on screen now. Lower sensitivities can make it much easier to perform micro adjustments, so low sensitivity players typically excel at things like sniping long lanes and correcting their aim from a body shot to a headshot. On the other hand, higher sensitivities dominate when it comes to raw reaction speed and turning in close range engagements, notably with shotguns. If you're within that 5 to 10 meter range, the player who can look to their target and shoot the fastest will almost always win. Close range situations can get really hectic, and especially if there are multiple opponents involved, being able to rapidly turn is essential to react to people who are behind you or jumping over you. When it comes to primaries though, Destiny requires you to land multiple shots, so you've got to track your targets and hit headshots. Destiny isn't a twitch shooter like Call of Duty. You can't just snipe your opponent once in the body and call it a day. High sensitivities may be very desirable in games like COD, but in Destiny, a great deal of primary engagements are decided based on who is more accurate throughout the engagement. Remember, getting the first shot is important, but that doesn't guarantee that you'll win. It's important to remember that shooting faster doesn't always equal a faster time to kill. Someone who's on a lower sensitivity and hitting all headshots will always win a primary duel against someone who's on a higher sensitivity and missing half the time or hitting mostly body shots. If you can hit all your shots on 10 sensitivity, by all means you should totally go for it. But in my experience, very few players are able to achieve the same accuracy on high sense that they would on a low sense. So based on all of that, which end of the spectrum do you think has more value to your playstyle, or are you somewhere in between? Personally, I like to have my special weapon be a sniper like 90% of the time, so I really value my precision and my consistency and currently play on a 4 sensitivity. If I have really good crosshair placement, I'm very accurate and able to react just as fast as people on higher sensitivities, and even as fast as the mouse and keyboard players that I'm up against on PC. If I was a shotgun main though, I'd definitely bump my sensitivity up quite a bit because making huge turns and rapid reactions in close quarters is pretty hard to do while playing on 4. I also want to note that I wouldn't recommend anything below 4 or 3 because turning just becomes comically slow. I will not tell you what sensitivity to use. However, I will recommend that you take the things I just mentioned into account and then go experiment and find out what is best for you. If you notice that you're consistently undershooting your target, for example, you may benefit from raising your sensitivity. For anyone who may be unaware, undershooting your target is when you're moving your crosshair towards an opponent, but you consistently fire before reaching the target. I will say though, it's okay to experiment with your sensitivities, but please don't change your sensitivity because you had a bad game or an off day. As humans, we all have good days and bad days, and it can really throw off your muscle memory if you're constantly switching your sensitivity. Ultimately, I think it's best to try out a lot of sensitivities and then try to settle on one that works for you. If you stick with one sensitivity, you'll see it pay off in your aim as you become more and more accustomed to it. Next up, let's talk about button layout. There are quite a few viable choices here depending on the type of controller you have, and there is an insane amount of customization when it comes to button mapping. Regardless of what you choose though, the goal of your button layout should be to have your thumbs on the thumbsticks as much as possible. In pursuit of that goal, here are a few button mappings that I'd recommend. Jumper is one of the pre-made button layouts that makes your grenade go to your right bumper, melee to your left stick click, super to where your jump would normally be, and most importantly, the jump goes to the left bumper. This is an S-tier button layout because it allows you to jump without ever moving your thumbs off the thumbsticks, and Destiny has quite a bit of aerial gameplay, especially at the higher levels of competition. The only problem with it is that you have to remove your thumb from the thumbstick to crouch. Puppeteer is a popular and easy to learn layout that simply lets you crouch by clicking your right thumbstick. In my opinion, Puppeteer and Jumper are both great options, and all of the other pre-made options are pretty bad for Destiny PvP. Custom button layouts are where things really start to get interesting. You can basically map any button to any action, and the potential is endless. You could even try to come up with some sort of blending between the Puppeteer and the Jumper if you want. Personally, I play on default settings with just one customized change, and that is because I have a custom controller with my jump and crouch on the back buttons, and that's better than any custom button layout in my opinion. The one change that I've made fairly recently is switching my interact button to my left trigger. That means that when I want to pick up heavy ammo or revive my teammates, I just have to aim down sights and it will revive them automatically. This is great for Trials of Osiris because you can fight back against your opponents while getting a revive without even pressing an additional button. It's a little awkward at first, but I've come to like it. Just be warned, it does make sparrow boosting a little interesting. Next up is your physical grip type. I know this isn't an actual setting, but it has the same kind of effect, so I'm mentioning it here. There is the normal grip that most people use, and then there is the claw grip, where you basically use your right index finger to press buttons and your middle finger for the trigger. Personally, I find this to be incredibly uncomfortable and awkward, but using it does accomplish the goal of letting you press stuff like jump and crouch while keeping your thumbs on the sticks. There are also some miscellaneous settings that don't deserve their own section, but still should be mentioned. Starting out on the controller page, we have movement controls and inversion. There's really no reason to mess with these unless you already use them for some strange reason, and I honestly don't understand why anyone would play inverted. Next is controller vibration. I play with this off, and I definitely recommend turning it off. If your controller is shaking around all the time, it can throw off your accuracy, and if you're death gripping your controller in order to combat the vibration, you're probably gripping it way too tight. Vibration is great for immersion in story games and perhaps even Destiny PvE, but I wouldn't recommend it for PvP. Next is auto look centering. This is a very odd setting that moves your right thumbstick when you're sprinting, and I wouldn't recommend using this unless you have some kind of condition that makes it difficult to move your right stick while running. Next up is this somewhat new setting called double press delay. This ranges from 1 to 5 and determines the amount of time that can pass between 2 button presses that still triggers a double press action. For example, if you have it set to 5 and you're trying to hunter dodge, you can wait a bit longer between your 2 presses of the crouch button. Lastly, here's something that isn't a setting, but should be: the traction mod. This is an armor mod that slots into your boots and allows you to turn faster while sprinting. I don't actually use this mod because at the time of recording this video, having 2 scavenger mods still guarantees that you get 3 or more shots per special ammo brick, and to me, a sniper main, that's too good to pass up. If traction was a setting instead of an armor mod, or if I was a shotgun main, then I'd totally use it. Lastly, I think this setting is only available on PC, but if you set reticle position to PC default, it will make the reticle actually in the middle of the screen. For some reason, they put the reticle lower down on console, perhaps so that players would be able to see further upward while still being centered. If you're hearing this, I'm guessing you found this video enjoyable, informative, or helpful in some way, so a like rating on the video would be very much appreciated. Next up, I highly recommend checking out this playlist I have designed to help you improve your PvP performance and specifically your KD ratio. It's on the top of your screen now and linked in the video description. If you're not interested in that, perhaps you'd like to learn how to do better with a sniper, arguably the best weapon type for controller players. I made a comprehensive guide to sniping and it's on the bottom of your screen now.